Okay, in this final module of the day, we will talk about very quickly the final two theories on globalization. So let's start with the feasible globalization. So this theory has been developed by Danny Roderick, who teaches at Harvard University. He is really a very influential economist, and most importantly, he is my countryman. He is from Turkey, and he wrote a lot of articles and books on globalization. He indicates the problem with the current globalization trends. And last year, another Turkish guy got the Nobel Award in economics. But my expectation was Danny Roderick was close to being awarded by this prize, but maybe in the future, who knows? Okay, anyways, as I said, Danny Roderick developed this concept in different articles and books, but this is one of his most influential books. And the subtitle of this book explains the feasible globalization theory, the backbone of the feasible globalization theory. The global markets, states, and democracy can't coexist. According to Danny Roderick, we can't have these three goals accomplished. We should only choose two of them: global markets, states, or democracy. So here we have a trinity, and according to Danny Roderick, this is an impossible trinity. As I have said, you should choose only one of them. This is called the impossible trinity of globalization. So the subtitle explains that, but let me underscore that again. The three goals we can have as a nation is national sovereignty, or having a strong national state. Secondly, we can prefer to have a democratic policy that focuses on the domestic demand of the people, or we can prefer to have a high economic integration. Okay, so we can pursue a so-called hyper-globalization. All these three goals are accessible. We can make them happen, but we should only choose two of them. So this illustration summarizes the impossible trilemma of globalization. Now, for us, the important part of this discussion for a class on globalization is, so if you focus on these three goals on this diagram or within my slide, we should know today nation states are not going anywhere. Okay, at the beginning of 90s and then 2000s, many people believed that nation states are so-called withering away. Okay, because global institutions, globalization as a process was so strong that the global institutions would replace the nation states, according to some people. Okay, according to some scholars, nation states were incompatible with globalization. They are kind of an obsolete institution belonging to 17th century, namely Westphalian era, right? But time and experience showed us that nation states are maybe stronger than ever. Okay, so that's why it seems nations and global communities made a preference. They prefer to have one of the first, one of the three goals within this list, right? We will have strong nation states. So if you think in this way, we can use our national sovereignty to have an hyper globalization, or to have domestic policies whose primary target is to meet the domestic demand. Okay, now please don't read this, don't read what you see between these three goals on the diagram. Okay, but you can read that one. If we think we should have national sovereignty and hyper globalization, according to Donny Roderick, this is wearing as a nation state a golden straitjacket. Okay, so you have a strong national state, right? You can use it for different purposes, and primarily you can use it to serve the interest of your domestic people, right? But you prefer to embrace hyperglobalization. So you simply decide to use all the powers to ensure the global integration. So here you think like globalization is a holy target, right? You just ignore all the domestic demands and you surrender to the global international markets, global markets, right? Global commercial markets or global capital markets. So according to Danny Roderick, this is like wearing a golden straitjacket, right? Nation, your nation state, its powers are not a servant of your own people anymore. Okay, so according to Danny Roderick, this is not a feasible globalization, right? Because if you ignore the domestic demands, sooner or later there will be some social unrest, and even there will be some social conflicts. Okay, and secondly, if you have a strong nation state, you can prefer to embrace solely the domestic demand, right? You can completely ignore the globalization or integrating to global commercial markets, right? And you can solely focus on domestic demands of your own people. Okay, this is another preference, and Danny Roderick thinks, okay, that can be good for the people, but globalization has a lot of benefits, right? It is not something that we can rule out completely. This is also not a feasible option, right? Okay, this will lead us to embrace nativism, maybe, right? We will at extreme, we will be an autarky. We will have an autarky. We will have a self-sufficient economy. So this is also not a good and reasonable preference, right? So we talked about possibilities two possible combinations within these three options. You can pick hyperglobalization and national sovereignty. You can have democratic policies and national sovereignty, right? You can also have hyperglobalization and democratic policies at the same time, right? This would be good, right? Because here globalization and democratic policies are two options, and you can have them both, but only if you can have strong global governance institutions that can create some policies at the national level that can serve both to globalization and to the domestic demands. But it seems this is not very realistic. This is not very easy to have. We are far away from this point, right? We don't have this global governance structure yet. That's why this is another unfeasible solution. So, what should be done? According to Danny Roderick, our nation states should recreate themselves, they should redesign themselves. So they should have the Bretton Woods Compromise. So that what you read here is this sentence is in the incorrect position on this diagram. Okay, this is not the Bretton Woods compromise according to Daniel Roderick. Bretton Woods compromise should be somewhere in between these two vectors, right? It should take into account both democratic policies and not hyper globalization, but a sane globalization. Okay, so here again, it is all about the pace of globalization. Okay, if you can slow down the process a little bit, if you can do it more nation friendly, I don't know if you understand what I mean here. Okay, if you can have a compromise between globalization and your domestic demands, then this can be a feasible globalization or sane globalization. Okay, so somehow we should break down this trade-off for nation states. Okay, before talking about the next theory, I will show you two video clips. First of all, in this first video clip, you will see Danny Roderick speaking about his own sane or feasible globalization theory. And in the second video clip, we will watch a video clip that is about economic crisis in Greece, roughly 10 years ago. Okay, their Greek economy should make a decision. This was not a conscious decision. Actually, it was forced. They were forced to make this decision, and their nation states began to completely ignore the domestic demands, and they solely focus on hyperglobalization through European Union. So if you do that, you will see your regime becomes more and more undemocratic. Okay, let's watch the first video clip and then we can talk about that.
I'm standing here with Professor Danny Roderick from Harvard University, leading expert in globalization. And Professor Roderick, perhaps you could just briefly explain what you mean with this sane globalization that you're speaking about.
Sane globalization is one where we're trying to create a balance between global markets and the prerogatives of the nation state, where we don't push globalization to such an extent that it becomes actually unsustainable because it lacks the kind of legitimacy and the rules that at this point only the nation state can provide.
Okay, and when you spoke here during this seminar, you talked about 3 different paths that the world might take, the good, the bad and the very ugly one. And which one do you see as the most likely to be pursued in the future?
Well, we're certainly on the what I call the bad path, which is business as usual. The good path, which I associate with sane globalization, is the path where we reconsider our push for hyperglobalization, and the ugly path is a return to 1930s style full-out protectionism. And I said that somewhat paradoxically. Our current path, the business as usual path, which is trying to, which assumes that we can continue to push for sufficient global governance to create the backing for a rapidly expanding globalization might actually be the enemy of a good path, where maybe we're a little bit less ambitious on globalization, but we get a healthier globalization as a result.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Roderick.
You're welcome.
Okay, here we listen to the master's voice, right? He summarized everything very quickly in a very elegant way. So as you can understand from this short discussion, going back to the interwar years is also not a good option, right? Focusing solely on domestic demands, domestic targets is not a good option, right? So we should not rule out a reasonable globalization because it has many benefits, right? But we should not solely focus on the globalization either, right? This is also not a reasonable way because domestic demands are also important, right? So why are we embracing globalization? It is not an end itself, right? The better way is to make a compromise, to find a balance. And according to Danny Roderick, developing countries were unfortunately forced to embrace an hyper-globalization, right? They were forced to ignore the demand of their own people, the welfare of their own people, right? Bretton Woods system created a compromise, as we saw, right? It didn't forget the domestic demands, inequality, the welfare of the people, poverty in the developing countries were important for Bretton Woods system, right? So there was an optimism about that with the Bretton Woods system. We could provide the prosperity, we could ensure the development of the developing world by moving together, right? By making the decisions together. at the beginning of 21st century, according to Dana Rodrik, the best example of a country who pursues a sane globalization was China, by the way, right? China integrated her economy to the global markets very successfully, but at the same time, with its strong nation state, it prioritized her own national economic targets. Okay, now we will watch another video clip where you will see a country which failed to find a balance between globalization and um, domestic demands. And this country is Greece, and that was not only a bad decision of Greece. Greece didn't make this decision freely, right? This decision was a little bit imposed by the European Union on Greece. Let's watch this second video clip.
It's the end of the bailout era for Greece, after months of negotiations with the Eurozone. Did years of austerity save the country? Or did it only make matters worse? After the 2008 global financial crisis, structural weakness in the Greek economy and vast government debt compounded the problem, forcing the government to adopt austerity measures in exchange for European funding. Pay freezes, tax hikes and pension cuts were met with large demonstrations.
8 χρόνια φτώχεια, ανεργία, φοροκλοπή, λιτότητα, δεν πάει άλλο. Απαιτείται μια πλατιά κοινωνική συμμαχία για να ανατρέψουμε αυτή την πολιτική.
Left-wing Alexis Tsipras came to power in 2015 with anti-austerity promises, but was forced to make concession after concession. Greece's national income decreased from almost $300 billion to $200 billion between 2010 and 2017 after years of recession. And youth unemployment peaked at just over 60% in 2013, sending more than 400,000 people overseas. The country borrowed a total of $330 billion from the EU, the European Central Bank and the IMF. But its economy is showing signs of a turnaround.
We feel that we built credibility over the last 3 years. We've been outperforming our fiscal targets. The economy is returning.
But not everyone is as optimistic.
Αυτό κάναμε. Υποθηκεύσαμε το μέλλον των παιδιών μας και των εγγονιών μας για να μην πάμε και χειρότερα ακόμα. Η Ελλάδα θα είναι για πάντα κάτω από την γερμανική μπότα.
Austerity was policy across much of Europe during the recession. Ireland, Portugal, Spain and Italy all made drastic spending cuts to secure money from international lenders. But after years of painful reform, Italy wants to shake things up. Elections this year saw victories for the country's two anti-austerity parties. Now the coalition government is pushing back against measures imposed by its creditors. Portugal's government experimented with austerity in return for an international bailout of $90 billion. But public unrest displaced the political administration. In 2015, Prime Minister Antonio Costa immediately reversed the measures, increasing public investment, reducing the deficit, slashing unemployment, while at the same time improving economic growth. Europe's answer to the global downturn was conservative fiscal policy. But was austerity the only way? With Portugal spending its way out of recession and Italy considering a similar path, are there better alternatives for economic recovery?
Okay, so here there are some concepts we are not very familiar with, but austerity is a policy that suppresses the domestic demand to increase the nation's ability to pay the international debts back. So this economic policy is forced on the Greece government. So to understand these policies, for sure, we should have a broader discussion. But for Rodrik's theory, this is a kind of a textbook example. So that's why I would like to share it with you. Okay, so I need a little bit more time to discuss about the last theory. This will be world society theory. Let me do that very quickly, and then I will finish our asynchronous class today. Okay, the first thing we should know about world society theory is it is a non-statist theory, and it is an idealistic theory. What is the meaning of idealism in this context? It is the opposite of materialism. Okay, that means idealism has a different answer to this question compared to the answer of materialism. What is the driving force of the history and globalization? According to idealism, this is not economic growth, this is not an increasing saving rate, it is not an increasing rate of investment, it is not something about technology, okay? All these things are um, include, included to the material base of a nation or global community. And according to world society theory and any idealistic theory, not this material base, but the idealistic base is making the history on globalization. Not the states, not the capitalist class, not the multinational companies, nothing about the economy, but the values, the ideas, or more precisely, the ration of the world society determines the direction of the globalization. Okay, so grand theories are both correct and incorrect, right? Okay, there is a progress of something that determines the stages of the human history. So in this respect, grand theories we covered so far are right, but the incorrect part is they are only focusing on the material progress, okay? But rather than that, we should focus on the progress of ration. If you think in this way, okay, if you use an idealistic perspective to understand the globalization process, then globalization is the progress of our ideas. It is the progress of our values, ration, right? With the progress of globalization, the important thing is not having more material abundance, not having inequality or something, right? These things can follow the primary driving force of globalization. And this is something about ideas. The progress of globalization is producing better ideas. Okay, so to produce the better ideas according to world society theory, again we should have a global community where we can come together. Okay, so here community is a kind of platform for negotiation and interaction. So if we can build a global community which can be called world society, right, then through negotiation and interaction in this democratic environment we can produce better ideas, and in turn these better ideas can ensure material abundance and all the other things that can be seen as a position is a convergence of our ideas and producing better ideas. Okay, that's why producing world society is important. So for world society theory, the institutions are important, right? So if you think in this way, IMF, World Trade Organization, this should not be defined as some bureaucratic organizations, right? Which are mainly busy with determining technical details, right? Rather than that, these institutions are the platform bringing the members of the world society together, right? A good institution, a good global institution, a good global governance institution is the institution that can facilitate the interaction and communication among the members of world society. Okay, that's all about world society theory. That's all about for today, I guess. Um, so in our next class, I will bring some questions about these theories. And yeah, I will bring some questions about these theories for our midterm too. comparing these theories and interpreting some changes in the world through the lens of one of these theories will be important. Okay, so I will bring some questions to the classroom, as I have said, to explain my expectations in midterm 2, and we will have time to practice on what we learned during these asynchronous classes. Okay, let me finish with the same questions I repeat after my in-person classes. If there are any questions, any confusions, any complaints, any recommendations, do not hesitate to email me. And again, I appreciate your understanding. I hope everything can be fine in the next few days, and I can return to Boise as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and see you soon.